going to wave my hands around and it's going to be all over the place, but we'll give it a go. I'm Cathy Brown. I'm Chief Exec at the Initiative for Social Entrepreneurs, and we are a Birmingham-based social enterprise, and we exist to help start up, scale up and grow other social enterprises. So we work very heavily in the social economy area. That's our space, that's our niche of expertise, and why I'm here tonight to facilitate this panel and to hopefully answer questions that you have around social enterprise in general. So first of all, I'm going to invite Cleo and Bav to come and join me up here. And I'm going to tell you that our third panellist, Manley, sadly is not able to be with us, which is a real shame. I know Kiz, and so she's hip-hop heels. It's a very inspiring story. But what she has done is she has sent us a video. So in a minute, we're going to play that. Not yet. But it was just to let you know that we are two panellists and me. So in terms of, I'll give you a little bit about social enterprise in general, just to set the scene, particularly on Social Enterprise Day, which is just a really good day to be doing this sort of thing. So there is no actual definition of what a social enterprise is. There's nothing laid down legally that says this is what a social enterprise is. So what we tend to do is we tend to use the definition that is widely accepted by Social Enterprise UK, which is the membership body for those of us who are set up and consider ourselves to be social enterprises. And broadly speaking, that means that we are businesses that are set up with a specific social or environmental purpose or mission. It means that we are trading as opposed to simply being recipients of grant-type funding. So we are selling products or services of some form, rather than a sort of very more charitable model where we're receiving money to deliver things. We are doing something purposeful with our profits. So we quite often use the term not for personal profit. So we don't tend to have shareholders, although you can do, it doesn't preclude you from having shareholders. But what we tend to be doing is operating as not for personal profit. Our profits are going back into the business or back into our social mission. So broadly speaking, those are the characteristics of a social enterprise. And that means that you could actually be a perfectly normal limited company and still be a social enterprise if you're operating in that way. And as an example, if you want to go and look one up, I know a company called Webmart. So they do print marketing, so they take your printing and they print it for you. And they operate completely as a profit-based organisation, but in terms of things like paying their employees, they're very, very different. So they have a really flat structure of pay, including to the CEO. The CEO's wages are capped at a certain level. So if they make more profit than that, he gets no more increases, and all of it goes to the staff on an equal division, which is a really interesting model of working. And he tends to call it, I think, capitalist revenue generation and then Marxist distribution of the profit. But technically, they would absolutely be classed as a social enterprise. So there are many, many ways of appearing to be a social enterprise, not just the legal definition of a KIC or the legal structure of a KIC, a community interest company. But many of us are community interest companies, particularly here in the Midlands. So we have a much higher average of our social enterprises actually being registered as community interest companies here in the West Mids. So in the country as a whole, how many social enterprises do you think there are? So I'm going to give you a range. Who thinks there are between 5,000 and 10,000 social enterprises in the country? Okay. Who thinks there are between 10,000 and 50,000? Who thinks more than 50,000? Right, you lot are correct. So as of the State of the Nation report from Social Enterprise UK last year, over 100,000 social enterprises in the UK. And again, a little bit cloudy because of that issue around definition, but broadly speaking, that's about right. If you channel that down to the West Midlands, again, a little difficult to tell. We think probably about 10 to 15,000 across the West Midlands region as a whole. And here in Birmingham itself, probably about 900 to 1,000 that we know of. The pandemic has made information gathering a little difficult for that. A lot of social enterprises that we know and work with have gone. A lot have sprung up that haven't come through traditional channels, and they haven't come through any of the events or the networking events where we might actually gather their details. So, yeah, you know, around there, about 10,000. And in the West Midlands, more of our social enterprises are led by women than the national average, quite a lot more, interestingly. But strangely, we employ fewer women in our social enterprises. So we're really not quite sure why that happens, but it does. And we have, like I say, we have more kicks than average, so more of our social enterprises are actually registered as community interest companies. We are more socially than environmentally set up and focused within the West Mids. So our social enterprises are more likely to have a social mission than an environmental mission. We're an average of about 9 years old, although we do have, at the moment, quite a high failure rate for our social enterprises before 3 years. So one of the pieces of work that ISE are doing is looking at scale-up programmes that help our social enterprises at the point at which they're about a year old, so we can make sure that they have the stability that they need to grow and thrive and get through that 3-year barrier. And the common areas in the West Mids that people, the sectors that people set up their social enterprises, we have a lot of them, again, much more than the national average, in health and social care. So across that sector, we have a lot in the creative industries. And when we think about Digbeth particularly, that's perhaps not a surprise. And we have a lot that are working in sort of employment, education and skills-based areas, which would include ISE itself. But we really do, you can have a social enterprise in any sector. There is absolutely no barrier at all other than your own inventiveness to say, well, you know, no, you can't set a social enterprise up doing that. Of course you can. You can do them doing absolutely anything. And we're obviously going to hear from 3 very different social enterprises in a minute. So first of all, we're going to play Kiz's video, which you absolutely can do now. And then we shall hear from Cleo and we'll hear from Bhav.
Can I do it? Yes.
Hi, welcome everybody. Thanks for having me at Aston Uni. I'm Kiz from Hip Hop Heals. I set up a trauma-informed hip hop academy online and received funding from the Bearing Foundation charity. And the reason was to challenge inequality in creative health and arts and health. Here's a flyer from the first and second pilot that we did. We introduced the concepts of trauma-informed care to a model of hip-hop therapy that I designed around therapeutic writing, which involves using lyrics, working with groups of people, and supporting them through challenging emotional difficulties. So just a bit of background then. We have thought very carefully about how to tackle inequalities and decided that as most inequalities are intersectional, that means they have roots in poverty, literacy, class, race and so on. They're very complicated. We looked at where the gaps were and we saw that Black people are overrepresented in the secure units and face huge inequalities in an intersectional way throughout the life course. And so we wanted to focus our efforts to support men, young men and Black people. We spot signs of trauma in our workshops and signpost people on, and we offer tools for self-regulation so that when challenge happens, people can deal with it alone. We aim to create feelings of safety in our group so that people can go through what's happened and share in a safe, supported environment, and then have a creative output, a creative release. So global majority people, that's people from ethnicities where their colour might be black, brown or darker skinned. We're actually the majority, not ethnic minorities. So global majority people are at higher risk of developing mental health conditions at than white majority people. And you can see from the logos here that Birmingham Centre for Art Therapies was a partner for Hip Hop Heals here. So they also helped expand their service and tailor their work to global majority people through the course of this work. Global majority people are less likely to access mental health services. So why trauma-informed hip-hop? Hip-hop culture, being grounded in empowerment, continues to be our voice, our community, and our soundtrack for the struggle, pulsating through the mind, body, and spirit. It is local, it is intergenerational, and it was global. Here's a quote from The Healing Power of Hip-Hop by a professor in social work from Austin State University in Texas. This gentleman is also my mentor, Dr. Raphael Travis, who's also associate professor. So when we're looking at hip-hop in the healing space, people sometimes become confused. It can be violent. It might show images that are highly sexual or seem violent. Despite this, we have lots of culture around hip-hop which centres on empowerment, knowledge of self, self-identity, being connected to one another, and having the right to do you in the way that seems right for you. So I bring challenging material into my workshops and in my training, and I say that these images or these lyrics don't represent me, but the song has something of value that we can talk about here. So this is one of the ways that we can still bring in challenging material into the healing space. So originally Hip Hop Heals was a project. I did workshops, I worked around conferences, I offered keynote speeches, delivered programs in hostels for the homeless, in prison probation and in mental health secure units. But then when the pandemic hit, I realised that lots of people were unable to access their community spaces, and the one-off nature of my programs wasn't really enough to sustain an income for me as an individual. So I set up a company in order to expand knowledge in the country about hip hop and therapy. Lots of people don't know about what the arts therapies are and what they do. So essentially, using music and dance, art, drama, you can help people to self-regulate their emotions, to work through challenges, and to come to a place of calm and find joy through tragic circumstances. And I noticed that in the world of arts and health, where people are putting on projects and offering services and workshops, people might do singing for lung health or dance for dementia and improve people's cognitive ability through music and so on. But I'm from an Indian background, and I wasn't seeing any culture from my background represented in the creative arts and health workshops. So being a massive hip hop head, drum and bass fan, junglist, reggae fan, love techno and so on, I noticed also that sort of electronic dance music and hip hop culture wasn't recognised in the arts therapies. And then I discovered hip hop therapy itself. So when I trained in an MSc for creative writing for therapeutic purposes, after struggling with bereavements and tragic deaths in my own family, I started to call upon creativity and its healing powers for myself. As I realised it worked, I offered it to other people in workshops, and then ultimately in the pandemic we stopped because of the lack of workshops. We weren't allowed to go out in public, we weren't allowed to launch our programs, and we pivoted to offer training. So people like frontline workers, social workers, teachers, people who are delivering art therapies, I've trained in order to widen their cultural offer different music and art forms that they can use in their helping practice. And so the trauma-informed hip-hop workshops became trauma-informed training academy. So what we do in the academy is we've just launched two pilots, done external evaluation on the impact and looked at whether they're competent and whether people would recommend us to others. And we got a score of 8.4 out of 10 in terms of whether people would recommend us to others. What we did was we modelled techniques for delivering trauma-informed workshops. Now, I mentioned intersectionality earlier. Here's a definition. We didn't ask people to come who were just from a global majority background. We invited mainly global majority background people, but also people from the white majority, because we're all intertwined. And just because you might be white majority doesn't mean that you might not be affected by race, class and gender inequalities. So just quickly, Kimberly W. Crenshaw raised this critique of society, this model of thinking about society and privilege, and thought about opposites. So if you think about the world as black and white, red, blue, 1, 2, binary, you've got these ideas here. So for example, being fertile or infertile, male or female, being black minority ethnic people, or being white, and then thinking about where you lie on this can offer some insight onto the different things and the different processes that are operating in your life to oppress or to hinder or to support or to help you grow. And everybody has different forces operating in their lives. So when we're working, we open our work to everybody, but we particularly focus on people who are struggling with disability or marginalisation or exclusion. And then trauma itself is defined here as an event that it's the emotional response to an event that happens that can overwhelm the system, the nervous system. So trauma is not the story of something that happened back then. It's the current imprint of that pain, horror and fear living inside of people. So the art, the music, the lyrics of hip hop open up conversations. We work in groups where we set up boundaries, offer safe space, and use group therapy models. And then what we actually physically do is create writing, listen to lyrics, watch music videos, open up conversations with people who've experienced similar things in the group. So for example, homelessness, because people can interrelate with experiences, it gives them a chance to feel heard and witnessed, and that can bring calm in the brain. So to finish, why do we tell our stories in lyrics and bars? It actually can help our brain move from the traumatized brain function where your alarm bells are ringing and you might go into flight or freeze. Your amygdala is an emotional processing brain area, and it overrides all the other brain activity when the alarm bells ring. If you put your hand on the gas flame in the kitchen, you will immediately move it back without thinking, oh, I've put my hand on the gas fire, I'm going to have to move it. I should move it now. Let's move my arm. That doesn't happen. Your amygdala just triggers off your instant reaction. And so when people have been subject to horrific experiences in war or in violent scenarios and been attacked, the brain sends warning signals to us to avoid those similar situations. So if you smell an aftershave of somebody's attacked you, your brain tells you to run. If you hear a loud bang and you've been in a like a car bomb explosion scenario, your brain will tell you to run. So having the chance to put stories into lyrics from our experience can help sequence and order them, which helps you to process and put them down. And that's just one area of what we do and one way that we can help calm people down after traumatic experiences. There's many other layers and there's so much more to say, but I'm going to say goodbye and thank you for having me. If you want to find out more about Hip Hop Heals, please go to our website, It's hiphophealsuk.org. I'll say it again. It's hiphophealsuk.org. There is a podcast called Go With The Flow, which has lots of rappers and hip-hop therapists from around the world talking about how they use lyrics to help them process challenging life events. And on all our social media, our Twitter and our Facebook, Instagram, we are Hip Hop Heals UK, and it would do me a massive favour if you could like, share and subscribe. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you so much. Bye.
So a remote thank you to Kiz there. When I first met Kiz last summer, she came and did our rap party at the end of Social Enterprise Drive, which is the Birmingham and the West Midlands Social Enterprise Festival. And I had a chat with her about all of this. And as a result, I got my 24-year-old son, who had recently been diagnosed with ADHD, dyspraxia and bipolar disorder, to go and look at. And she still had, at that point, the funded 10-week courses. And he's got a bit of a hip-hop background anyway. And he found it incredibly valuable. So just on that level, absolutely, you should go and have a look. But incredibly interesting anyway. So do go and check Kiz out. I'm going to ask our panellists here to introduce themselves now, to tell us a little bit about their stories, their motivations, the purpose, the social mission and purpose that they have for their organisations, and then we will question them.
Perfect, thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Bhav and I'm the founder of Storyteller. Storyteller was born after my background as a lawyer, went to social entrepreneurship. You'll probably say completely different fields, and how's that even come across? So during my day job as a lawyer, I was obviously working with businesses and working with business partnerships. So I always had that business acumen, but then also I was also involved in the charitable side, the CSR side, and also pro bono clinics. So it was always an integral part of myself to give back, and always wanted to give back in terms of when I had volunteering opportunities. But I think the turn for me came when I started traveling. I think travel is one of the things that opens your eyes and broadens your horizons to everything around the world. You'll see incredible sights, but at the same time, you'll see things that incredibly, worse situations. And what we have here, it takes us back a lot, thinking the basics sometimes these people don't have at all. And I think that was my experience when I went to India, Peru, where I saw the basics of education was such a difficult thing for people to ascertain. There were adults that I was seeing were completely illiterate. There were children that had to drop out of school due to other commitments. And for me, I think that became a really, central part of something I wanted to give back and something I wanted to do to try and help this. Obviously, that's a huge global mission. But at that point, I thought, I want to do something. Perhaps at some point, I'll think of a way I can do that. That's when I came across a podcast. It's something called the Lewis Howes School of Greatness. Highly recommend it. And I remember listening to one of the podcasts there, and Timothy Sykes was being interviewed. And he said, in terms of impact, what are your views and how do you think people can impact best? And he said, volunteering is great, but to really impact someone, you've got to create something which can have a high level of impact. So just in terms of that scale, I thought, well, actually building something that can give back on a larger scale will make a larger impact in terms of perhaps just volunteering here or there, one day or two, which will make an impact, but not on a global scale. And that got me thinking, really, at that point, how can I bring together the two things I'm most passionate about, which was travel and giving back? And that's how Storyteller was born. It brought together travel, which were the accessories that we sell at Storyteller. Some of the products, for example, are a very similar concept to Pandora, where you collect and commemorate your travels from around the world using hand-painted flags, and you can engrave that and bring it onto your keychain, which you then bring with you. And the profits of that go to our social fund. So 10% of every product goes into a social fund, as well as our other projects that we do. And those funds directly go towards education around the world. So far, we've worked in 9 different countries and donated over £20,000. And in terms of our model, the way we work is by partnering with charities, but also partnering with local NGOs. Something we've done over time is that we've learned that with charities and large corporations, you can donate money to them and make an impact. But actually, when you go out to these places and you actually see what they need, you'll have a better understanding, and actually that will help you with your global mission. And actually, as a social enterprise and social business, you can really think about what do they need and how can we give back. So we've actually now started an element where our team goes out once a year to places that we feel we need. We'll work with local NGOs and deliver projects ourselves. Just a recent example, just pre-COVID, we went out to India and Nepal as a team and worked with non-conventional schools. So things like the school under the bridge, which is in Delhi, and it houses, I think it's 300 children just under a bridge, and that's the school. So the concept is quite simple, but in terms of the resources and needs, huge. So we worked there for a couple of months, understanding what they need, delivered workshops in terms of what they needed and what actually we learned from them. And actually what we learned before that was we went there with an entire plan of this is what they need and this is what we feel they need. And actually we've got there and completely threw that in the bin, because actually when you get there, you understand that what we think they need perhaps is basic English requirements, basic maths requirements. They don't need that. What they need sometimes is just personnel skills. I don't know about you guys, but myself, things like how to communicate clearly, time management, how to manage your day, these basic skills are not taught in schools probably around the world. You learn that as you go along, and then I think in university in particular, when you got given tasks, you're a bit like, well, how do I manage all these tasks at the same time? And that's when I guess you build those skills. But if you learn those at a younger age, it'd make a big difference to how you go about your tasks and your schooling as well. So building workshops around what we felt that they need and understanding them and delivering those was integral. And I think going forward, that's what we want to do and want to deliver. So in terms of our educational aspect, that's one of our big goals. And our mission is to impact 1 million individuals around the world. And that's our long-term scale goal.
Fabulous. I think that's one of the things that most social entrepreneurs realise, hopefully quite quickly, but not always, is that the community that you're working in or with have got to drive what it is that you're doing. And that understanding that it's about their needs, not your assumption.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what initially we kind of appreciate that. Sometimes we think from a distance, this is what they need. But actually, once you work with them directly and learn from them, that's the best way to deliver what they need. And I think then the second thing probably, which I guess we focus on as well, is longevity. For us, there's no point being a short-term Band-Aid. You want to be that long-term relationship. So how we do that is building the relationships now, understanding them, and then delivering as we go along in accordance with their requirements. And I think I wanted Storyteller to be a wave of new startups who can show that having a balance between profit and philanthropy can still be beneficial for everyone involved.
Definitely. Cleo.
Hi everybody. Do I have to press anything? No. Just checking. So my name's Cleo. I am the founder of Mission Diverse. So Mission Diverse are a social enterprise set up to reinvest the profits we make from diversity and inclusion training with corporate companies back into the community. So the way in which it works effectively is we go into different organisations from all across the UK and in different countries, and we support them around issues pertaining to race, age, gender, etc., all matters relating to diversity and inclusion. And we effectively have a miniature kind of startup program similar to BC, plug to BC because I came on for their program. And it's really about supporting people from underprivileged communities. So the idea here is that people of colour, young people, women, and people from underrepresented communities, really. So the real kind of crux of where Mission Diverse came from is I wanted to start an enterprise program that supported people of colour, namely because we hear this language, particularly in the black community, around generational wealth, but there's no real support or process on how to do so. And as a result of that, there's people with great ideas and aspirations, but there's no support or resource on how to make that happen. So for me, it was quite integral that we provided a service to people who could access and start thinking about generational wealth without them incurring the costs for it, because that tends to be the biggest barrier for most. So when we set up Mission Diverse, we made sure the program was completely free of charge, which it still is today, because the money that we make from our training services funds the enterprise program completely, which means it's free at the point of access to anybody who wants to access it to. And I'm normally, I speak forever, but that's pretty much what we do in a nutshell. So I'm going to hand back to Cathy.
Thank you both. So we're really open to however you want the next set of time to go. I've got a series of questions that I can pose and we can talk, but obviously it's going to be much better if we've got questions coming from you guys. So I'm going to ask the first one, but then you can all be thinking, and either via the Slido or sticking hands up or whatever, we'll take questions from everybody. So my first one to get us going is, what are the barriers that you've both experienced?
Ladies first. So the barriers, I think, will be, well, I think everyone will experience this, is people just having the belief in the idea. So what you tend to find is people tend to go, oh, that sounds nice. And the reality of it is they're just kind of like, okay, that's something, until it starts to do something. So you kind of have to have that internal self-belief that this is what you want to achieve, regardless of what anyone thinks. And sometimes it might sound a bit cliche, but if you don't genuinely believe in it in your kind of the pit of you, you'll find that when someone does critique that idea, you'll be further away from wanting to start it or launch it. So I think one of the biggest challenges is the mental barrier for people who want to go into the space of social entrepreneurship, because it's, when we think about business, we think about making money. So the notion of giving it back, but it not being a charity, is quite hard for people to get their head around. So actually it's kind of being resilient in the thought process that I want to start this idea, I want to make it happen, irrespective of what people think. Like the notion, again, if you apply for the BC program, you'll find this out, about failing fast. They're not actually paying me, so yeah. But the idea of failing fast, like, you're better to try it and for it to not work than to not try it because somebody else has said something. And I think that's probably one of the barriers that you'll find within yourself more so than what anyone else can say.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's one of the biggest ones, is getting started as well. Sometimes I think you probably think, oh, it's a good idea, should I start now, waiting for the right moment. I think sometimes that's probably the one thing that you shouldn't do. So it's good to kind of, when you have an idea, go ahead with it and see how things go, and don't be afraid of failing. I think one of the things that probably I've learned as well over time is that failing is good. Failing fast is good, as Kay said, is you'll learn a lot more from failure than you will from success. And that's one of the things that you'll learn over time, and the barriers that you'll come across. I think second thing is probably time management and thinking, where do I start with all this? Because there's so much to, I guess, learn and then implement, and how do you do it? And sometimes if you're a solopreneur, you kind of think, well, actually, I'm on my own. How can I do all of these jobs? And you look at these larger brands and you think, well, there's a branding manager here, marketing manager. You've got so many different names, but actually, if you're on your own or just the two of you, where do you start? And sometimes it is the one thing that I think you need to overcome probably is that mindset of it can be done, but also learning can take time. So perhaps sometimes being in a space such as an AlphaWorks or WeWork, where you can kind of be in a social environment where everyone's on the same journey, really helps, because you can kind of learn from different people. I guess as well, if you're from a certain background, you can share ideas, but also learn from different people about how they did things. And getting past that is probably one of the biggest areas, I think.
And from the point of view of the many, many social entrepreneurs that we see through ISE, I think one of the biggest barriers is actually lack of basic business skill. People have a great idea and they have the will to get on and do something, but actually thinking about how that's going to pay you, for a start. Amazing how many people come to us and they haven't factored in drawing a wage for themselves is huge. And so, yeah, and obviously, you know, I might say that because that's where ISE comes in. That's what we do an awful lot of, is we do startup programs that teach you how to write a business plan for a social enterprise, and, you know, what you need in terms of insurances if you're going to employ people and all of those business skills that you need. But I think it can be a huge barrier because people don't realise that they need them, and when they do realise that they need them, they don't know how to go and get them. So I think that's something that we see quite a lot. So open to all of you. Anything that you want to ask us, anything you want to elucidate from that conversation, Slido, whatever. we got a question over here?
What would you say would be the first step for getting started?
We've probably all got a slightly different view on that. So mine would be, have a look at the ISE website, and whenever our next startup course is, come and see us.
If it's setting up as more of like a social enterprise model, think about what's probably the one passion that you want to make sure that it's integral to your business, because I think sometimes with this it's hard to get up every day and keep going. So if you're passionate about it, you'll get up and go, and you won't think it's work. You'll enjoy the whole process. So that's incredible to just pick one particular passion. In terms of the business side, it's a minefield, and the one mistake I made, probably my background, is I wrote a 15-page business plan. Before I had any product, if I had any ideas, I wrote a business plan. So this was the first thing that I presented out, and I think I haven't even finalized my product yet. I have no idea how I'm going to market these things. I have no idea about kind of funding. So that's one thing not to do, but have an idea about what you're going to sell. And in terms of revenue, where will the revenue come from? If it's you're providing a service, who's your customer? And really get into who your customer is. Once you find out who your customer is, you can really work on delivery. So that's one of the things to kind of make sure that you kind of work out who that is and how you're going to get there. I think second thing is you want to get started, but also don't wait too long to get in it and get through the process. The one example I always give is Uber. Everyone knows Uber now, but no one knows about, I don't know if anyone knows about Magic Cart. So Magic Cart was the concept that went out first, and it was basically Uber. They set it out, it went out, got released, didn't do anything. Uber took the same concept and implemented it, and we all know Uber. So that just shows that ideas are good, but implementation is the game. And if you can implement an idea, you can get very far with it, and it doesn't matter what that is. So believe in yourself as well.
I'd probably be, I'm trying to think of what I did now. So just to give you context, I think I've started 3 businesses now, and all kind of in a different way. But in terms of kind of getting going, I'd probably just say, like, be confident in the process that you're going through. And that sounds really cliche, but in the sense that you will have an idea and you'll want to launch it. There's no harm in testing the waters in terms of kind of asking the question, like, I would never write a 15-page business plan ever, not just because I don't have the patience for it more so than anything. But I think that if being actionable by doing things is far better. You'll learn far quicker. So, you know, I've got this idea, right, let me just ask a few people, let me get their thoughts on it. Let me not rely on what they say, because that's a very, very small segment, but let me just get a feel for what comes back, and let me not just ask friends and family, because they'll probably create an echo chamber and say it's amazing, it's wonderful, unless you've got my parents and they'll tell you it's rubbish. So I'm quite lucky in that regard. But yeah, just be actionable in your approach, so you don't have to kind of go for, I with my first business, for example, wrote a business plan. It wasn't 15 pages. You're better than me, but it was quite long and extensive, to a point where I never looked at it, because it's never going to apply in the same way that it would have been if I'd have had a conversation or if I'd have gone to an event. You know, I ended up on the B-Scene programme because I went to a networking event. I met Carolyn, we had a conversation, I launched my business, etc. But if I was sat behind my computer developing that business plan, would never have those conversations. So be practical in your approach as opposed to kind of theoretical. No harm with the theory of it, just to give you some concept, but also, yeah, be practical in it. No worries.
There are absolutely loads of West Midlands resources for startups, whether they're social or not. So School for Social Entrepreneurs is always worth looking at, as is our own growth hub here. There are loads and loads of places that will give you that sort of, okay, what do I need to know to just get going? I would sound a note of caution about if you genuinely think that you've come up with a product or a service that is genuinely new and innovative, the moment that you talk to somebody outside of your legal entity about it, you can no longer copyright the IP. So just be careful if it's genuinely something in that nature. You know, if it's something more standard, then you're absolutely fine. But if it's genuinely new, the Central Library here in Birmingham have got an IP department that you can go and talk to, and they will take you through all of this, and they will give you free access to the patents database and all sorts. So if you've got anything that's of that nature, go and get the right help first before you put that idea out there, and then somebody can just nick it off you.
Just following up on that, actually, just one thing. In terms of, I guess, if you have a kind of product, one thing that I found very useful was things like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, like crowdfunding campaigns, because if you have a product, you can really test the market there. And rather than just getting friends and family to get feedback from you, you get real feedback. And if you have, it also helps with kind of initial funds because people will purchase the product on there, but you also get really good feedback, which is the main thing. But it's just another way of, I guess, getting that initial feedback on your idea. Indiegogo.
So we do. So have you had any external funding for anything? So not to pick on whoever asked that question, but are we meaning sort of investment from... Was it you?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
So yeah, loans, equity investment, grants, anything that just wasn't, your own revenue, your own saving.
Yeah, so in terms of our social projects, now we're partnering with other brands. So we've got kind of partnerships with a couple of the corporate banks as well, where they want to be part of our kind of giving status. So how we work with them is they'll provide some funding and help us kind of establish and make our we call them do good projects on a larger scale. So that gives us a bit more flexibility. But in terms of their CSR objectives as well, we're able to kind of help on those, and there's a good partnership both ways. But no, in terms of the actual funding itself, this is in the pipelines for us, but we're just waiting for the right time.
So I think the first year of setting up Mission Diverse, so we launched in 2020, I probably spent the whole year applying for funding to be able to kind of start the programme. One of the niceties of being a social enterprise, you have that mix of kind of grant funding and also revenue you can generate for your business. So let me just list off some names that I can think of because they might be useful if you do want to apply for funding. So the West Midlands Police and Crime Commissioner, they offer out funding as and when, normally the start of the year and kind of towards April, for around about £5,000 to kind of get your project or idea off the ground, but you have to be kind of incorporated as a business. We just recently received funding from Unlimited, so they are really good in terms of startup. If you're kind of in the early phase, and you don't have to be incorporated, or you can kind of look at their scale-up funding if you are. There's many different organisations, even organisations like KFC we receive funding from, because they have their kind of avenues for CSR, corporate social responsibility. Apologies for the acronym. But there's many places we receive funding from, but it helped because when we were in our first initial startup phase, so we were 3 months in, launched in October, November, really got going in January. That small amount of, well, it might sound small, but the £5,000 to start your business or to kind of get the idea kind of tested is really useful to show it works. So for some people, it might be a case of, I just want to test to see if this works, and actually I can apply for a bit of funding. That doesn't mean I have to financially commit, and I can also get some good kind of information, some good data gathering, and then I can apply for larger pieces of funding, etc. So looking at funding is a really good way to do it as a social enterprise, so you don't have to incur the financial cost. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have like corporate kind of partnership and sponsorship packages where organisations say, here's a few £1,000s, tell us what you did with it, and then that's kind of the engagement we tend to have with some. So, yeah.
There's also an option which can be often overlooked, which is social investment. So again, it's quite strong here in the West Midlands, and there are 3 primary organisations, but there are others as well. So there's the Key Fund, there is Big Society Capital, and the Social Investment Bank, and they are all funded by the Dormant Assets Fund, central government. So this is bank accounts that have lain dormant for 40 years, and all sorts of bits and pieces like that get put into the Dormant Assets Fund, and then it's used for activities like social investment. And they don't just, it's a loan rather than sort of grant funding, so you do have to pay it back. But it is one of the challenges that small businesses and social businesses experience, is that getting funding like that, getting loans from a standard bank, is actually quite difficult, because for whatever reason, given that we actually outperform traditional business, they are wary of lending to social businesses. So those three organisations and some others specifically lend to social enterprises and social businesses on terms which are generally longer and more favourable. And they will fund startups as well, so you don't necessarily need the financial history that you would need with other organisations. So that is also worth looking at. Right, what else have we got? Now this is a lovely one, and I'm going to give it straight to Bav, which is, how do you measure your impact?
Yeah, interesting question, because I think impact can be seen in a lot of ways, and sometimes it can be hard to measure someone's impact. So how we do is quantitative methods. So, for example, if I go back to some of the workshops we delivered in India a couple of years ago, we looked at the journey of what the classroom there and the people we worked with one-to-one, what they needed and what they, I guess, we were looking at in terms of the growth method. And then we would actually interview them, their teacher, and think about actually how has these particular things that we've done helped. So that helps us measure the impact in terms of what we've done, how has that impacted this particular individual, what we've done right with actually what we've done, but also in terms of what have they taken away with it. And that's how we measure our impact goals. But we also keep it on a long-term basis. So we'll then touch base with them and think, if we've delivered particular workshops and particular techniques, are they still using that? How are they using that? Is there any development that we can continue with that? The reason I think that we've, I guess, gone into a bit more detail is we applied for something called the Prime Minister's Points of Light Award. And essentially it's run by the government. But to do this, you've got to show integral methods of impact, and if you're showing that you've got long-term impact as well, how do they have that, and how are you? They look at long-term for that. So if you have a social enterprise and you want to make that long-term impact, there's a number of things where you've got to show long-term contact as well, and how you're connecting with the individuals that you've worked with. So showing that you're delivering a particular workshop or a particular outcome first, but then saying how you'll develop their skills and ideas as you go along is key, and that's how the impact continues going forward.
So mine's a mixture of the two. So I guess because we kind of have a variety number of people kind of apply to our enterprise program, we can kind of measure the people that we've supported numerically, but then also it's about kind of their journey. So it's not just kind of statistics, it's kind of who have we supported, but also how have they found it, where are they at now. So we ask people kind of case studies around where are you at in your journey. We check back in with them, you know, in terms of how they've progressed and developed. I recently purchased a product from one of our entrepreneurs, Arlene, who at the time wanted to launch a tea business, and she just launched it, a kind of premium tea line. And to see kind of the package arrive at my front door, knowing that this was in inception when she first came on the program, those kind of case studies and stories are far nicer to see and witness as opposed to kind of numbers, because it's really hard to put a name to a number. So yeah, we tend to kind of look at case studies and that qualitative kind of understanding of how people have kind of moved through their journey.
Firstly, I need Arlene's details because I'm a real tea aficionado, so let me know. Yeah. So at ISE, we personally measure our impact through, we talk both social impact and social value, and we use them to essentially to market our services and how good we are, and in the context of bids and funding and everything else. So it's our collateral for our status as a good social enterprise. One of the things I would say is think about it really early on, and how you measure your impact fitting in with your social purpose and mission. So are you measuring the things that actually demonstrate that you are achieving that mission? And if you aren't, do you need to think about how that mission is articulated or what you're measuring to make sure that the two are aligned? And from our point of view, I mean, it's not at all dissimilar. It's the entrepreneurs that come through our programs. How are they doing? How are they doing in 6 months? How are they doing in 3 years? How are they doing beyond that? We have people that we helped to start up 15 years ago who are still very much connected with ISE. And we also run employability programs through our Women's Enterprise Hub, and we provide office space there for female entrepreneurs. So we have a number of things that we can translate into our social value and our social impact in that way. We do a lot of quantitative in that way, so we have numbers. We also try and tell the stories, though. I think it's really important because all of us are dealing with people, and it's really easy when you're calculating, you know, some set of numbers about social impact to forget that actually it's about what the difference is that your intervention has actually made. And in my view, you need both things, I think, always. Anything else from the floor? We're working down Slido then. Here's another one. I'm going to give this one to Cleo first. So, what's the biggest mistake you made?
Oh God, where to start? So I'd probably say biggest mistake. I guess not being lean enough, and when I say being lean enough, I mean kind of, I guess, being tight effectively. So what I'm saying is kind of doing the things that are necessary, completely necessary to make the business function. So I'm one of those people that gets shiny object syndrome all the time. So if it looks great and it sounds great and it's a good idea, I'm probably going to try it. And I probably have people around me sometimes that are like, yeah, let's do it. And naturally that kind of detracts in some cases from the core of what we're trying to achieve. And because of that, I tend to say that, and I can't really give exact examples, I do it a lot, which is kind of that shiny object syndrome of wanting to do something because it's a really good idea and it doesn't actually benefit the business. So, yeah, it's hard to give an exact example, but I think the biggest mistake would probably be just kind of having that recurring shiny object syndrome. When it's tempered, it's great, but when it's all the time, you kind of have to have that reel back in, and thankfully I have people around that can reel me back. So, yeah, there's probably a few mistakes. I'll think of some and then I'll let you know. Aren't too embarrassing.
Other than the 15-page business plan, which I never used, probably perfection. I think perfection is the enemy of progress. And I think for myself, especially when it comes to probably social media, marketing creatives, you're waiting for that, like the perfect video or the perfect edited image. And sometimes you can spend hours and hours and hours trying to get this perfect item, when actually sometimes you think you need to get it out there. You need to just post that reel, post the video, share the image, and let it be. I think if you spend so much time on certain things, you're getting too hooked up on one particular thing rather than trying to get on with the rest of the other things. And in the grand scheme of things, when you are kind of spending time on creatives, it's good, and it's obviously great to have a really good creative, but it's not the integral part of the business. It's not the only thing that it works on unless you're a marketing agency. So it's just, I guess, just making sure that things aren't perfect, and that's fine.
I think for me, with my sort of personal head-on rather than my general head-on, I found out about 18 months ago that I have ADHD, which made a sense of a whole lot of my previous life. But the mistake I still keep making is I forget that I can do the ideas bit, but I have to have somebody with me who can then take that and execute it, because I will not. And I cannot keep that in my head, and I've got to. And every time I do it, I go, "You've done that again." It's like, ah. So yeah, there you go. Knowing yourself and being honest about your own weaknesses, I think, is really important. Excellent. That's okay. Let's do this one. Can you tell us a little bit more about your team and how you recruit?
Could you be the first one to answer that question? Because before you said that, even on many business, social, what is it called? Enterprises, or my English is not perfect, are run by women, but you don't really recruit many women as men.
Yeah, so we're probably, we buck the trend for that one at ISE, so I currently have an all-female team. And it probably helps that we run a women's enterprise hub, and so while we don't discriminate, and we absolutely do interview men for that, we are conscious of that environment. So we did have a male employee until last August, and he's gone back into commissioning. So no, I mean, we don't discriminate in that sense. We don't say we must have a woman for this post, because obviously that would be illegal. But we think quite carefully about the diversity of the audience that we work with and the communities in which we work, and we require. We're quite specific about the skill set. So when we do a job description, for instance, or a job advert, we don't put things in that actually aren't relevant to the job. And it's amazing how many people do that. You'll see in every job description needs attention to detail. Well, do you know what? Actually, no, not all jobs need attention to detail. And you will rule out a whole load of people who look at that, particularly women, who'll go, oh, no, just I can't, I'll be found out, you know. So our approach is to be very, very careful and specific about what we're putting out there in order to obviously get the best range of people back into the organisation. And yeah, a bit more about the team. I mean, gosh, we range from a 17-year-old apprentice to me at 54. So, you know, and that's a good sort of 3 generations, arguably, in the workplace. But that's not uncommon. And, I mean, there's some great research out there that actually says having older people in your workforce is actually really beneficial, because if your management sort of layer or people are mid-30s, 40s, your youngsters will actually see them as parental and they'll hate it, but they'll see us older people as grandparental and they like that. So having an age range is really good within your organisation. And people, I think, are better now at thinking about things like neurodiversity and how that fits within a team. So my team would be absolutely hopeless if we were all like me. So I make sure that I actually have got people who are detail-oriented and will complete and finish things, because I know that's not my strength. So we do a lot of teamwork to establish what our strengths and weaknesses are, and to make sure that we've got a really good balance in the team so that we can manage all of those different things that we need to actually make it work.
Yeah, I can answer this question because I've had to go through the nightmare of doing it of recent. That's probably what you saw, like an Excel of breath. So in terms of, I guess I'll start with the end of it. In terms of recruiting, so when we were looking for a D&I trainer, and we ended up getting 2, my thing was, I think with CVs and hiring and job ads and all that kind of thing, oftentimes it's really asking about what you can bring to the organisation as opposed to what the organisation can kind of offer to you. So for when I put out the job ads that we had, I was looking at, okay, this is what you're going to come into effectively. Are you interested? If you do like it, then apply. So we didn't have anything in terms of like degree and qualifications, because you rule out a load of people who are great at the job, but they don't necessarily have a degree. For example, my sister, she is probably one of the most senior people in her organisation, doesn't have a degree. I have a degree. Yeah, exactly. So we ruled that out. And we also kind of looked at the benefits of, we're a tiny business, so like 3 months ago it was just me. And the idea was, we want to attract people to a business who want to kind of really get involved in this kind of space, as opposed to, we can't offer massive salaries, we can't do blah, 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 massive benefits, but you don't have to kind of book your holiday off kind of thing. That's a day you have back for yourself, you know. You can come and go as you please, you can use the office, you don't have to. Those kind of lifestyle benefits that people actually really value, as opposed to kind of, do you have a degree? You will get this, you will get a company car. None of that, we can't offer that, but actually there's far more benefits to what we can give to you that's kind of giving you that work-life balance. Again, sounds a bit cliche, but I think with a pandemic in between the last few years, people have realised the benefits of it. So for us, in terms of recruiting, it was really more around what could we give to the person who wants to come and work for us, as opposed to what are you going to bring. And I think with that, we kind of had a really wide mix and cross-cut of people who applied for the role, because being a diversity and inclusion trainer is really kind of specific. It's like, you know, it's not HR, it's not teaching, it's something in the middle. So naturally, There's 2 of us. We're looking, so there's 3 of us in total. Hoping to be 4 kind of around about February time, and that's kind of been kind of swift thrift. So we took on somebody 2 months ago. We had a new starter start yesterday, and hopefully we're recruiting for a position in February. Yeah.
So we've got 7 currently. Probably 8 or 9 by the end of the financial year.
Yeah. So like for us, it's been quite good in terms of kind of like, I guess, quick growth, slow growth, depending on how you see it. So yeah, in terms of the team, we're all female. Not because I'm the female in the business, but yeah. So I'm 29. I'm the second oldest of 3. So Susanna's 23 and Siobhan's 32. So yeah, there's a kind of, we're quite close in age, but actually it's quite good because we still have different experiences and that kind of thing. So that's how we did it.
Ours is very similar. In terms of the hiring process, we look for people that understand the bigger picture and the mission. If someone's passionate about the mission, but they're also good at what they'll do, they'll want to do it. So I think being in the room, surrounded by people that are passionate about the same thing, brings good results. And that's what one of the sole things we look at is what's your experience is, and in terms of that aspect, and are you passionate about what you do, so whether you're in marketing or whatever area you're in, but also do you understand the global mission and what's your experience about education? And that doesn't have to be trying to, someone that's really wants to change the world in terms of education, but it could just be that they want to make a change on a global scale, or they've had their own personal experience there where they wished that they had a better skill process or something as when they were younger. So just to have being on the same page in terms of that mindset is something that we look at as part of the kind of recruiting process. In terms of our numbers, we're up at 6 now, but we have 2 people that are based in Europe, and this gives us the flexibility because we've got people that we offer that you can work from wherever you are. We've got now, I guess probably since COVID, the kind of Zoom calls and Zoom meetings now is a bigger thing, so you can get people from around the world who match the skill set and also can offer different things, and I guess that's helped us in a way to, in terms of our product base, we're able to go into the European market now, which probably before, when there's someone there, it makes a big difference. So if you are looking to scale in terms of the product that you're selling, if you can get somebody within an area that you're looking to scale to, it always helps having somebody on the ground in that particular place. So that's one of the reasons why we started to do that.
So we've got a couple that are specific now. So Cleo, what type of corporate clients do you have, and do you feel they're just ticking a box, or are they genuinely interested?
Great question. So types of client we have clients in a variety of different sectors. So public sector like the NHS, prison and probation services, but also private clients as well. So solicitors firms, we work with banks, we work with companies abroad as well. So we have a few clients in the USA that are tech-based and tech-related. We've also just started working with a client in Switzerland, and they do a lot of work in terms of, well, they're a charity. They do a lot of work kind of around reducing malaria, HIV in different countries. So we work with a variety of different industries and organisations from kind of all over. And in terms of kind of tick boxing, so this is like really key for me. So I've always thought, even as a small business, particularly with what I do, we kind of naturally as a small organisation want to work with larger businesses because it makes us look good. But I also thought with Mission Diverse, particularly with the social element of it, I didn't want to be associated with a business that was doing something performatively. So it was kind of a case of, look, we're working with this social enterprise called Mission Diverse. It's run by a black woman, so aren't we great and wonderful? And that's quite a nice sell from a CSR point of view. So honestly, to be honest with you, I've said no to a lot of companies that say they're looking for work and support. And I guess the way, I mean, just to give you context, we've had companies call and say, you know, we need some training. We've got budget left over before the end of the financial year. We were looking to get something done. And I'll just tell them, like, you know, we're probably not for you in that case. Because, you know, naturally I could say, yeah, it would be great to have that extra piece of work. But the logic of it is it's there for the sake of being there. It's an afterthought. We've got a bit of cash left over. And I don't want to then be associated for life with that organisation, with that business. And what we tend to find is those organisations that do get in touch, they work with us on a longer term basis. So it's not a case of just, we want some training and then we'll see you in 12 months' time. So actually a lot of the clients we have, we work with them on an ongoing basis to help and consult with them thereafter. So they kind of want, I guess, a critical friend. So they're not trying to have me just come in and deliver a session. okay, we worked out what the issues are. Now let's try and kind of eradicate them effectively as best as possible. That's how we kind of work with people, and we're very honest with clients. So if you want training, great, but that's kind of the first step. If you're really trying to embed a diverse and inclusive culture, these are the things you're going to have to think about, and you can kind of get a feel whether they're interested or they're just kind of needing something in that moment, or they're just, you know, being quite performative and ticking a box. So hopefully that's useful.
Absolutely. And Bav, we've got a specific question for you. How did you transition from being a lawyer to setting up a social enterprise? Go.
Yeah, a bit of a process. I think the good thing that there were quite a few transferable skills. So in terms of, I guess, writing documentation, whether that's intellectual property, drafting NDAs, things like that were very helpful. It was probably worse because there was 3 founders and 3 lawyers. So basically our creativity was 0. So basically in terms of initial kind of marketing tactics and things like that, it was very, I guess I'd say, a corporate view. Which is obviously the wrong initial view we took. But I think that transition initially was I stayed in my legal job whilst I built the social enterprise. The good thing about that is that you can build that on the side without any time pressures. But also then whilst you're kind of trying to get your product right and getting everything right, you still got that financial income coming in. In terms of the actual transition from leaving into going into full-time is, I guess I then surrounded myself, as mentioned earlier, into a startup hub. So I know there's things like WeWork and things you're probably aware of. Being in a place like that was an absolute game changer for me. The reason is because you're then surrounded with people that are on the same mission as you. They're probably in a startup space or a very early stage business, but also they're from different backgrounds. So there could be someone from branding, there could be someone from marketing, some come from PR. And then you can actually bounce ideas from them and vice versa. So at that point, when I first started off, I had a lot of people who were startup phase wanted contracts drafting. So I helped them and they helped me with my marketing and branding. And actually being in a space like that, people are very approachable. That's the one thing when everyone's on the same journey and you can ask someone for a bit of help in certain areas. It's the best thing you can do. So that really helped the journey initially. And I think I still continue to do that. So creating that network early on, LinkedIn is brilliant. I think if you were to add someone on LinkedIn, send them a message, people, most people will respond to you, and you can ask them questions, or perhaps even have a mentor through a LinkedIn call, which is brilliant. So at a startup, building a startup and having the right circle is probably the number 1 priority, and you can do that in ways of WeWorks, LinkedIn, even like BC, and I've got to plug once at least. But just different ways, I guess, of doing that. And if you build that circle, it makes things a lot simpler. And I guess when you're also starting with perhaps just 1 or 2 founders or a small team, you feel like you've got a larger team because you've got someone to reach out in specific fields. And that's always great because you can research all you want, but sometimes it's hard to find the answer just off Google or online.
In fact, we'll flow into another question that we've got. So who have you got in your team or on your corner that is helping you keep you true to your purpose? So is there either somebody or a group of people that does that for you?
In terms of the social or...
Yeah.
I guess what probably keeps us there is more, there's a network of people that we've built over time, and that's in different areas. So, for example, from the social perspective, we have someone who worked at Patagonia. Some of you might know the brand, and obviously for me, that was a huge inspiration. Another person is, there's an author called Robin Sharma, who some of you might know, 5 AM Club and Monk the Soul Ferrari. He's become a very, very big mentor for us as well, because in terms of his global social initiative, he was very good in terms of just the way he built his business and built his books. Say Patagonia, I mean, they're a huge business, but the way they built it in terms of the giving back has been brilliant. So that has been helpful for me just to bounce ideas in terms of, am I taking the right steps from a social perspective? And sometimes I think it's difficult because you see these really good steps, but then you see a bit of a brick wall. And then sometimes it's hard to think, oh, actually, we did really well last year, but now it's become a bit stagnant. So I think then just sharing and bouncing ideas, thinking, are these ideas relevant, or should we go with this process or that process? It's good to just bounce ideas sometimes. So I guess creating that is very good. From a business perspective, just having a business mentor, perhaps arranging 1 phone call a month and just saying, this is what I'm doing, this is where we are. Or even sometimes, I guess, if not a business mentor, you can have a friend who runs a startup and understands business, because it's just like having someone that you are accountable to, the accountability friend or the accountability mentor. Because if you say to someone, next month, I'm going to launch this product, and then on that call, you haven't done it, you're accountable. You feel like, actually, yes, I did mention that, but I haven't done it. Is there a reason why? If not, I need to start that and start the ball running with that. So having accountability mentors or friends is really good to have as well.
I'll probably just touch on that as well and kind of add to the same. So again, if I think about my work that I do through BC, I actually made a friend, Stuart, and we always had this kind of in-running joke that he used to run a tea business, I used to have a catering business, and then I launched Mission Diverse, he went into a marketing kind of agency, and we work really closely together. So I don't pay Stuart a penny for anything that he does, but he's very much a close friend, and he's very much just interested in what we do. And as a result of that, we kind of bounce ideas back and forth all the time, and it's just great to have that additional person. So if you are kind of the one individual in your social enterprise, if you do have a person who you can share ideas and bounce things off, that's really quite helpful. And again, like close family and friends, you've got to have people that are around you that are honest and that will critique your idea, whether it be good, bad or ugly, and kind of be willing to receive that. I oftentimes run towards critique, because if you can kind of see the flaws in it, that if someone else can see the flaws in your idea that you probably didn't pick up, as long as you don't get defensive about it and you can kind of be rational, that tends to be quite useful. So having those good friends, and also having people around you, family, friends, if you do have them, to kind of be that critical friend, like you mentioned.
So ISE's a more established social enterprise, obviously. So we've been going 23 years almost now. And one of the groups that immediately came up in my mind when I thought about ISE was our board. So we have a phenomenal board. It is something that we go into with people in our startup courses about how important and transformative a good board can be. How clear you need to be with them, what their commitment is, and what they're giving to you. But ours, and how they work with you is really important, because you do need them to challenge, but equally you need them to be supportive. I would have an incredibly difficult job as a chief exec if I was not supported by my board. And for ISE, I can say they're knowledgeable, they're local, they're experienced. So we have people who run social enterprises, we have academics. They're a really good mix, and they are incredibly supportive. And for me personally, again, I echo, the sort of critical friend group or the network. So I was out last night in the Bull in the Gun Quarter, which is a cracking pub if people know it, with two other female chief execs that run broadly similar organisations, and we had several pints of beer and we had a good old moan, and talked about a whole bunch of stuff to do with work that we probably shouldn't have been talking about to each other, and it is really, really helpful to do that, particularly when you're in that leadership position, because it can be really quite lonely. And making sure that you are looking after yourself in that way, I think is really important. I thought it was a great question, actually. I thought it was really good. What are you most proud of? Who wants to pick that one up?
I think probably I think last year I was invited to Buckingham Palace, and that was for the social impact that Storyteller's created. I think that was probably the first time where I'd actually stopped and thought, this is actually a really good, nice moment. And I think things like that, sometimes I think when you're running the business and you're running a social enterprise, you're kind of just on the run all the time. But it's nice to celebrate these small wins. And when you get these awards, which are whether local or global, it's really nice to have that, really. So I think that was just being in a room of change makers and the royal family. Obviously, I think just being in a room with people like that really inspired me for the next step, and thinking, actually, how can I get back in this room? Because it's been a brilliant experience, but once I left, I'd spoken to so many inspiring people that I kind of want to think, I need to be in this room, so how can I get back here? So I think that was one of the proudest moments, and hopefully one that I can get into again.
I'm not sure I can top Buckingham Palace.
Mine's House of Commons, but I mean, the government wasn't. Anyway, by the by. So for me, I'd probably say when we ran our first cohort of the Reach program, which is the program that we use to support people within the community to start their business. So for me, like what we did is we then paid for everybody who wanted to stand at the Black Pound Market in the October of last year to have a stand there to exhibit their businesses and to sell basically their products and services as they developed it. So I don't know, I was a bit surprised when I came in and I saw everybody set up, and when you see people go from having just an idea to kind of make it a product and service, and you can see them selling and implementing the things that you've taught them, that for me is probably one of the proudest moments. I mean, I actually cried, sadly enough, which I don't do often. I was just like, I can't believe this is happening. So yeah, that was quite a nice feeling, is seeing people kind of have an idea and see it kind of come to fruition, but also for me personally, going from having an idea during the midst of everything else happening with Black Lives Matter in the middle, well, kind of in the middle of town, and going, what are we going to do after we finish this protest, and then kind of wanting to do what I've done. I think that for me is probably one of the proudest moments. So yeah.
I think for me, because ISC has undergone quite a fundamental change, so we've moved from having a founder chief exec who's been there 22 years, who's incredibly well known and respected in social enterprise, both in the West Midlands and nationally, to obviously having a non-founder chief exec, which is a really different culture, if you like. There was a moment a couple of weeks ago where we were just so together as a team. We were doing a workshop to look at new website and branding, and it was just that moment of everybody with the ideas in the right place and the energy in the room. And I think for me personally, it suddenly felt like it was my organisation, which was lovely. And but for collectively, it was, just how proud I am of this incredible, resilient organisation that is transforming itself yet again for about the third time in its 20-odd year history. And how much of that is through the people that it helps and through the people that have supported it over the years, and obviously the team itself. It was a really nice. So proud of you guys. We're doing a really good thing here. It was lovely. Another good one. So, what are your future plans for your businesses? That you can tell us about, anyway.
Yeah, I think from a product perspective, our next steps is to go into retail. So we started off with online e-commerce platforms and then doing pop-up stores in John Lewis. But our next step is to be stocked into actual stores and then take it kind of internationally after that. So that's the kind of product side of things. From a social impact perspective, it's creating more long-term relationships with local NGOs. We've just started to work in Birmingham now, which is our hometown. So we wanted to give back here during the pandemic, just with something called ARC, and we're working with their schools. So I think working locally, but also into new countries and different countries as well, and continue our impact really, I think long-term, and working towards our global mission is our future plans.
So for us, it's really about kind of developing additional revenue streams. So we're looking at the moment in terms of, so I guess to give it context, we can at the moment only really make more money if we are in person delivering, which obviously becomes difficult if there's only a small team. So it's about kind of diversifying revenue streams to make sure we can still make money whilst we are in delivery or we're elsewhere. I think a big thing that people forget about social enterprises, again, it is really about you need to still make money. It's not charity. It's not just going to come in or flood in. It's about how do you generate revenue. So for us, it's about having conversations with people who already run successful businesses, whether they be limited companies or otherwise. I have a really good network of friends that I travel to go and see just to pick their brains for a couple of hours about what they're trying to do or alternative ways we can kind of generate revenue funds. So we're actually looking at developing a digital program at the moment that can be purchased anywhere in the world, and it means that somebody can kind of log on and engage with our materials and our resources without us physically needing to be there. So that's kind of the next thing for us.
So we're refocusing. So we've experienced mission drift over the last 2 or 3 years and become less focused on our core social mission. So what we will be doing over the next 18 months to 2 years is focusing on our startup programs, primarily in a place-based way in Birmingham. So we're going to be working hopefully in Ward End, in Perry Bar, in Stetchford, looking at Highgate. So some of our most deprived wards, and that will be getting social entrepreneurs through our startup programs, potentially giving them some seed funding to start with, but also connecting them into social economy clusters, which is coming from the combined authorities, really quite ambitious plans to grow the social economy for the West Midlands as a whole, to double it in the next 10 years. And so, you know, we're plugging into existing work, which is useful for us. So there's things are happening in Ward End and Perry Bar and whatever else that we can align with. But yeah, it's do more of what we're good at, really. What's your advice on marketing an idea as a social enterprise? My advice is bring somebody in who knows how to market.
Probably in terms of marketing is not being limited to one or two ideas. I'd probably say offline and offline. I know it's a generation of digital marketing right now, but I think over the years that is starting to become a lot less impactful. And you'll see this with Instagram and Facebook over time. 4 or 5 years ago, a lot of businesses used that primarily where there were Instagram and Facebook marketing, and then all of a sudden overnight, because of GDPR data regulations, that then wasn't as impactful anymore because people can now opt out of cookies and tracking. So digital, obviously be digitally present in terms of your social media platforms. It's a great way to create really good content and get new people basically following what you're doing and your journey as well. But also don't forget about the offline streams. I still believe that being in person at events, pop-ups, whatever you're doing is really good because you actually speak to people one-to-one, and the impact you can have and what you can learn from that is obviously just as good. And then just going back to even generic things where I think sometimes people forget about the amount of people you can get in front of by doing press, whether that's press releases or applying for awards. Again, applying for awards, even if you're a finalist at an award, you're at events where there's a lot of people you can connect with, or people that probably need services. A good way to get into that particular stream. And then press releases, again, that's been seen worldwide potentially, or even locally. It's just good ways to think about it. So I'd say don't stick to one particular method. Make sure you've got tabs on quite a few, and don't just digital alone.
Yeah, I'd second that. So I think, like with my previous work and my background, my degrees in marketing and business, do I use it? No. But in terms of the actual kind of practicalities of it, I think we really get wrapped up in social media because for most of us in the room, we can probably use it. So it's the easy thing to do. But over the time, if I look back at kind of my previous work, it's not always beneficial. So we have a lot of success through word of mouth. And that comes from building relationship, but also, to be honest, it comes from building a really, really good service. We don't get work because, we buy from people effectively. And social media is a great avenue to have, but I think if it's not the core of what you're trying to achieve, then honestly, I'd probably say don't bother. So, for example, like we run a service-based business. It's really kind of hard to convey what you do as a service because there's no physical or tangible product to show. It doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't work. So we'll post on social every now and again, but it's not the core of kind of what we do. We're not kind of like rushing to get to Instagram or rushing to get to TikTok or whatever the case may be. But also thinking about alternatives, like when we talk about marketing now, it's more about how do we create a community of people who are genuinely interested, like how are we adding value to the people who may want to engage with us. And also if we focus on that kind of ideal customer. If your ideal customer for us is like a HR exec, they are not going to be on Instagram. So for us, it's a case of, are we going to create a space where they can come and engage with us and learn? And then they might want to have a conversation thereafter. So I would say kind of the same thing as Bav, which is don't rely upon social if necessary.
And also, don't forget the really simple approach. So we have 2 buildings that are a good part of our income stream is rentals from those female entrepreneurs and ad hoc room hire and meeting rooms and all of that sort of stuff. We doubled it almost overnight when we actually just put a banner outside that said what we did. I've got a couple here actually, so let's do one of these. What does a good day at work look like for you?
Interesting. Just a mix of having something quite creative to do and then looking at things from I really enjoy the marketing side, so having one creative and then one something which is probably not as creative. And I think for me, probably the start of the day makes a big difference. I'm an early starter, so I think the kind of having something in a routine where I'm starting the day with a fitness routine, having time to myself in the morning without looking at my emails or my phone, and then just planning the day at the start makes a big difference to the way I set up in the day. I think before probably myself and probably a lot of us, the first thing you do is check your phone, and I think your mindset gets a bit cluttered. You're like, okay, I need to reply to all of this. Next thing you know, it's like 9 a.m. and you haven't really done much. So I think just having that time to yourself, 1 hour to yourself, whatever you're doing, do something which is probably related just to help ease into the day, and then plan your day from there onwards. But I like to have something which is a creative task, but then also something which I can kind of have something which is a focused brain effort, and I'll do something which is first thing in the morning where I'm thinking of ideas and implementing something like that to be earlier in the day, and then later on just have something which is slightly less impactful.
So you can miss me with the exercise in the morning. No, 'cause as soon as you said that, I was like, so yeah, I'm not the one for the exercise in the morning. But in terms of a good day, so I'm not actually like a morning person. However, I'm most productive in the morning, which is kind of a real annoyance for me, because if I do start early in the day, when I say early, I mean like 5 o'clock work, I'll probably get most of the things I need done out of the way, and then it's far more simplistic and calm. But actually, I think a good day for me is probably just not having a meltdown in terms of like what needs to be done. So, although I'm saying it in jest, I mean, the small things can sometimes kind of really overwhelm because you're kind of wearing all the hats in the business. So it might just be a case of, I find I get super overwhelmed with my emails backing up. It goes from in the morning having 10 emails to the afternoon I've got 70, and then I've got brain fog then, kind of similarly. So actually it's a case of just managing kind of my mood throughout the course of a day, knowing that I've got most of the things out of the way, and just so I don't have that continuous brain fog, I've got these emails to get done and sorted. If I get most of the things I need done out of the way in the morning, then actually my day kind of slows down completely.
Yeah, the wearing all the hats thing I think is a really important piece. I tend to find that I'm everybody else's backup, but nobody is backup for me, and sort of managing my days so that is less of an issue is what will then give me a good day at work, because I need to get some of the stuff in there that I really enjoy doing. Otherwise I get to the end of the day and I just, I may well have got through all the email, and I was down at 7:15 this morning setting up our stand at the Growth Hub because nobody else could do it. Fine. But I love this sort of thing. So this day is going down as a great day for me because I've done 2 hours of something I absolutely love doing. And yeah, that's just fab. Right.
Yeah, I probably waited before I kind of went fully off my full-time job. I probably I made sure that the product was right. I also then ran the Indiegogo Kickstarter campaign first, just to make sure that it's quite settled and the product was right, and to make sure the product was great, because I think that was the one where the impact wouldn't be there without the financial revenue. So it's very important that you've got a successful business model if you want to make that social impact as well. And then it was about managing time and ensuring things are done over a time period before you've gone full-time into running it. Because of that initial kickstart, that really helped, because you don't have that pressure. But the way I would run a social business as such would be, don't put too much pressure on yourself in terms of revenue to kick off with, because that, as soon as you do that, you'll make decisions which probably you wouldn't make otherwise. And I think then you go away from the long-term objective. So have the long-term goal of, I want this product and brand to be a certain space in 5 years, 10 years, but it doesn't need to get there immediately. So in terms of, I guess, just breaking even, having profitability, even if that takes till year 3, year 4, that's absolutely fine. As long as you know and you believe in your product and you know that at some point this is going to be fine and you can make adaptations to that, you'll make sure that the focus is there. As soon as you kind of start thinking about profitability as the main thing, that's when you'll start making decisions which probably aren't great for the long term of the business.
Probably say with this business, probably August of this year we became profitable. So about 18 months or something like that, close to 2 years. And what was the second half of your question, if you don't mind? I've forgotten already. Oh, okay. So great question. I never really had a real job, to be honest. Like, so kind of my background and story is I worked at Sports Direct whilst I studied at uni. And then I got asked to do a talk in London for £500 to speak for an hour. And I was like, okay, then I'm getting paid £5 an hour at Sports Direct. So I just moved back to Birmingham from university, and the guy that ran the store, who was not a questionable word I'm going to use next, but I shan't. And he was like, Cleo, you need to be ready when we need you in the store. And I said, okay. And then I got asked to do this, and I was like, I need to book some time off. And he said, do you remember what I said to you when you first started? You need to be ready and accessible. And I was like, okay, right. And I said, the day later, I was like, I'm handing in my notice. And he was like, he looked livid, basically, and he said some choice words, but I was just like, yeah. So that's kind of the extent of my real working life. But then I launched my business probably a month after that, so after I finished university. So when I say I never really had a real job, like not really a full-time job, that's kind of been employed by somebody else. So I've never really had that kind of cutting of the strings, because it's kind of gone from being £5 an hour when I was 18 to launching my own startup business, 21. To launching my own business and kind of having to go through that headache and struggle. And I think naturally you have to accept it. Like, the sound of being an entrepreneur, I actually hate the word, because there's so much kind of like a lot attached to it, It's not fun and it's not easy, and I'm not going to talk BS in that sense, but you've got to be prepared to kind of put in the effort, because you're probably the last person to get paid, but the one that's put in the most effort. So you've just got to be prepared to kind of accept that process. And if you can, because you're enjoying what you do, like Bav said, then actually it becomes far easier to do so. So yeah.
So I can't answer that question on behalf of ISE, because we've obviously been going for so long that I don't know when we first broke even or how long it took. But what I will tell you is that we made a small loss last year. And so it's not a constant upward progression in many ways. So revenue will go up and down, profits will go up and down. And one of the things that we see with a lot of our people who start up is that they haven't got any real understanding, or haven't sat down and thought about how long it will take for that to happen, because they haven't costed things, they haven't costed their services, they haven't worked out how much their products are actually going to take to manufacture. And you do need to have done some of that to have a reasonable view of it. So
yeah, my question is a bit long-winded, but essentially, like, I have a lot of business ideas. To say, for instance, I started a clothing brand or an artist as well. So I know about like the business mindset in terms of the product and bringing it to market, selling it, etc. But in terms of like switching and transitioning into either a service or a socially focused business, that, in my opinion, what my personal perspective, I feel like is more longevity or significance, etc. So it's like I always have loads of ideas. Like right now, I'm trying to, I don't know, set up a spice business or something. But as well, because I have ADHD, I have ideas every other week, and I probably start it, and then once I get over that learning curve, then I'm just like, I can't be asked, like, it's an effort. So like, how do you go from kind of having a job, having business ideas, etc., to finding an idea that you're passionate enough to, dedicate yourself to, while also it being significant in your eyes, in society eyes, etc., and therefore can be profitable as well?
So I'm going to give you my ADHD perspective on that, first of all, which is I absolutely am the same. So, ideas all over the place. And, 10 minutes later, I'm like, yeah, shiny, something else. And I'm not traditionally an entrepreneur. I ran a small business as a sole trader, which was me doing consultancy. It's not the same thing. So I'm a sort of incoming chief exec, because that's my business. But what works for me in terms of getting things done and moving those ideas forward is actually making sure that I have that support from somebody else, whether I've had to pay them as a project manager or whatever else it is, but is acknowledging I do not have it in me to execute those ideas. So, however that looks for you, if you genuinely are resonating with an idea, it's what is your support network to take that forward. And that might be simply working out how feasible it is as a first step. And, and if it's not feasible, then great, on to the next idea. But it's just having a support network to allow you to actually execute some of that stuff.
With the businesses, are you kind of running them on your own, or are you kind of are you kind of building them on your own, or are you doing it with somebody else, or?
Yeah, that's another obsession of mine. Like when it comes to marketing, website design, I just try and do it all myself, and then get burnt out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think with ideas, probably as I mentioned earlier, ideas are good, but execution is the game. And you can have as many ideas, and some of them won't be brilliant, but you've got to be able to execute it and look at the long term. Probably the better thing I'd say is have an idea and then sit on it. Don't immediately jump in and think, great idea, I'm doing it. Just sit on it, have a bit of a research, think about it, and look at the kind of long-term goals and think about yourself. In 10 years' time, would you be happy waking up and working on a business? So if it was that spice business, are you going to be happy in 10 years waking up and think, right, I'm going to sell spices? Because if you're not, don't do it. Because it's got to be that long-term goal. And if it's something you enjoy and you're passionate about, then you'll definitely get up and you'll make it work for sure. It might be a bit difficult in the start and you might not see immediate results, but you'll see it over time. Whereas when you have ideas normally and you'll see things that it's a problem, then you'll find solutions, which is obviously part of building a business. But something that you want to be long term and you're going to be committed to might take that bit longer. So just take your time with certain things. But it's great to have ideas anyway. It's good that you're a problem solver, which is brilliant. Some people find that hard. So I mean, the fact that you're having that, but just have a notepad, ideas book, write them down, and then have a look back at it maybe in like a week or two and think, is this viable? Am I going to enjoy it? And realistically, does it look like it's going to be profitable?
One of the big ADHD challenges is that we see time very differently to other people. So basically, you'll be operating on now or not now. So trying to actually envisage 10 years' time is virtually impossible to my brain. I can't do it. And it is genuinely a real challenge, and about 40% of the entrepreneurial population has some form of neurodiversity, a large proportion of which actually is ADHD, because we don't fit in traditional workplaces. But on the other hand, we often don't fit as, particularly as solo entrepreneurs either, because of course we really struggle to do things like turn tax returns in, which is kind of needed, but but it can be a massive challenge. But there are some incredibly successful entrepreneurs with ADHD, so it absolutely is possible.
Which is the idea you keep coming back to the most?
I don't know. I have a lot, but I think in terms of like life and like what I would be happy to see myself doing in 20 years' time is probably something specific to yourself in terms of like diversity initiatives and stuff like that, and solving a problem for people that have had experiences of myself, whether it's in the corporate environment, schools, etc. So, but I feel like those ideas are more complex to bring to fruition than making a t-shirt and selling it.
Yeah, but doesn't mean you shouldn't do it though. Like.
Yeah, I just don't really know where to start. I think that's the problem as well. Like,
Yeah. Like, I have a chat with Carolyn afterwards. I'm happy if you were looking at the same similar space to me. I'm happy to have a chat and just tell you where I started. But like, I guess I'm kind of the same in terms of like having so many ideas. But I kind of find like, what do you come back to? But more often than not. So what I didn't mention when I kind of introduced myself was, I guess my big passion. So we specialise in the area of race, although we do kind of cover a wider spectrum. And that kind of came from when I was 13, when my dad sued one of the largest hospitality companies in the UK and won. So for me, naturally, like, that's kind of an innate focus for me, hence why I kind of come back to that over and over again. But if that probably didn't happen, it would probably not be as integral for me. It'd still be important, but kind of for me, that's what it comes back to for me. And also I'd say, like, when you have these ideas, write them down on a piece of paper. Have you done the 5 why exercise before? Okay, so basically you write down on a piece of paper what the idea is, and just write why, and then answer that question that is. So like, I'm asking you, why are you doing that? And then you ask yourself again, why? Ask yourself that 5 times. You'll come to the root cause of the issue or the business idea. If you can't get to the 3rd why or the 2nd why, then you probably shouldn't do it, because it's probably just an idea. That sounds great, but actually there's no kind of root cause that you're trying to fix. There's no problem you're trying to solve. If it's more complex, it's fine, but you've just got to make sure you do it because you know the reason why you're doing it, as opposed to, that sounds good. Because let's be frank, I know about 10 people that have started clothing brands. I think they're the next Gymshark or the next Nike, and it's the next nobody. You know, because it seems very easy to do. Like, these shirts are branded and printed, you know, because it's very straightforward in terms of a process, but actually to make it work, it's completely different. So, you know, sometimes taking the path to least resistance isn't the best way to go.
So we've got about 7 or 8 minutes left. I'm actually going to ask both of you to give us your top 3 tips to somebody who is thinking about starting a social enterprise. And potentially we've covered a fair bit of those, I would imagine, in this last couple of hours. But yeah, what are the top 3 things that you would get somebody to do?
I think probably number 1 is build the right circle around you. And what I mean by that is those family and friends who are supporting you no matter what. If you think I'm passionate about this idea, you don't want someone who's so negative about every time you talk about this, they're just negative. You want someone who's going to be positive around what you're doing. They're able to, even if they can't help you directly with the business, they're still able to assist where they can and things like that. Also then having the right mentors at an early stage. Attending or joining something like Be Seen or Aston University have quite a few different kind of courses that you can join as well early on, which gives you the good place to start, because sometimes it's starting a business or a social enterprise is so much to think about. So I think when you kind of take a step back and join one of these cohorts and courses, you'll understand a bit more about where to start, and you'll take a bit of a step-by-step process rather than trying to just work everything out yourself, which sometimes can be quite overwhelming. And I think second thing for me is build a bulletproof mindset. I know it's easy to say, but you will fail, you will fall. Sometimes you'll get up and think, I don't want to do this, I can't do this, or you know, something that you've thought about, it was the best thing ever, didn't work. It's something that over time you'll create, but just having that, it didn't work, but it's fine, and just carrying on. Sometimes the thing that you wanted to happen didn't happen, and that's the best thing. So I think just having that mindset over time, which is built, is a great thing to have. And I think third thing probably for me is probably just management of yourself and how you work best. I think about how you're going to work best and what you're going to thrive in, and whether that's a certain type of area, where is best you're going to get the best ideas, where best you're going to work. Is it at home? Is it in a WeWork? Is it around certain people? And before you're bringing somebody else on board, if you are starting, for example, on your own, don't think I'm just going to bring my best friend on board, because if you're starting a business, it's completely different. You want to think about who's going to complement my skill set. So if you are good at certain things, who can bring something different to the table? Or, for example, you know, if you're the person that's got all the ideas, who can help you execute those ideas? So just think about when you are building your team and building your space, who's the best person who's going to bring the best out of this in the long term?
So mine would probably be, don't be shy, which sounds really silly, but like naturally we all have different personalities. Ironically, if you ask my mum, she'd probably say, Cleo don't like speaking to people at the best of times, and my job is talking to people on a daily basis. But don't be shy. So like this is a space, for example, where you can ask very open questions, and I think the best bit of advice that I've had in a long time was the only dumb question you can ask is the one you don't ask. And that really rings true for me, because if you don't ask the question, you'll never know the answer. And there's something that could be burning that you want to ask, and you leave and you're like, oh shoot, I wish I asked that question. So don't be shy, even if you really feel uncomfortable, like the saying, kind of get comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's kind of what you have to do. Also, I'd probably say listen, but don't always listen, which it sounds a bit stupid. So listen, don't listen to me. No, I'm kidding. But what I mean by that is sometimes you can go to different events. Like when I first started, I'd go to every single event in the morning, afternoon and night, because my thing was absorb as much knowledge and listen to people who tell you they know what they're talking about. Take it with a pinch of salt to some extent, but also take on the bits that are useful to you. So not everything's going to be applicable. What I've said today, not everything's going to be useful. Some bits might be, some things might not be. But you kind of can't be so tunnel vision that you can't see beyond what your initial goal is. And thirdly, I'd probably say, Well, I'd say apply for Be Seen if you haven't done already. Naturally, because and I say that, you know, I've mentioned it a few times, but honestly, I don't actually think I'd be here now because, and I kind of, it's an amalgamation of the two first things I mentioned. So I went to a networking event because I was being proactive. You know, I wasn't kind of I wasn't sat in a webinar, or I wasn't doing kind of reading a book. I was being proactive in trying to get my business off the ground. I wasn't being shy. I was having conversations with people in the room, and I met Carolyn, and that's kind of where it came to. I went through the Be Seen program, and I utilised every single use of the service that they offered me. I mean, to be fair, I'm like the furniture they can't get rid of. So, you know, I'm in there today, and I applied 2014, I think it was, so they can't literally get rid of me. So that's... Yeah. So until they go, I'm not going either. And like, I think a combination of those things, you know, it's kind of that willingness. But I probably had a fourth one too, which is kind of don't get caught up in the idea of entrepreneurship, which might sound a bit counterintuitive, but again, the notion of like events, awards, ceremonies, it sounds great, but like, to give you context, I've been working since 5 a.m. this morning. I'm shattered, and that's kind of how you'll feel at times. You need to be prepared and willing and knowledgeable that it's going to happen, but you've got to be prepared to manage that and be willing to take a step back. So I now take a holiday at least 3 times a year because otherwise you'll burn out. So be prepared. The world of entrepreneurship isn't all glitz and glamour. It's hard work, so be mindful of it.
And I think from the organisations that we see through ISE, the ones that don't succeed, that either don't thrive or do indeed go under, are the ones where the founders don't listen. So there's a sense almost of arrogance in a way that, you know, they know it. So yeah, always listen. The people who won't engage with their peers and aren't prepared to collaborate, I think is also where we see people failing. And there are people who aren't pragmatic. Actually, sometimes not through your own efforts, businesses are going to fail. And you can let that drag on far too long. That's the fail fast piece of it. If it's not working, let it go. And, you know, move on to the next idea if that's what you want to do. And that is how you then run a really successful social enterprise. And you make that change in the world, which is why you started it in the first place. So yeah, always keep it in mind. What is the change that I'm trying to affect here? And who is that change for? Who is it helping? Because that will keep you on track. So I hope I speak for both our panellists when I say I think that's been a really good session. I mean, I know I've learned stuff from those questions that I think was really interesting. So we thank you for those. I'm going to hand back to Carolyn. How do we end this?
Well, I think by actually giving our panelists a huge round of applause. Close things down. We always learn something new, so I hope you did. And yeah, just to say thank you very much for coming along, and do engage. You know, if this has piqued your interest, do engage with some of the things we're doing, but also, you know, some of the things that ISE are doing as well, based in your family. So yeah, thank you ever so much. Cleo, you can have bed. Exercising.
Weightlifting.
Another event.
I'll go to it.
Dear.
I'll be there. Get some pre-workouts.
I'm going back to my
Good thing.
Oh, it's such a nice place. We've got the old-fashioned decent beer fund. Yes, you've got the gunmakers arms just round the corner, which is nowhere near the ball. Beautiful register. Lovely, and they've got 10 rooms.
Thanks for coming.